Gotta admit, I'm becoming just a little bit of an Asmongold fanboy, and in a recent video he raised a point that I think is very interesting and worth exploring further. Namely, that years after years of DEI and wokeism have brought us to the point where we are no longer able, or willing more correctly, to recognize even real historical events for what they are, because they are too diverse. Now, that is a little bit of an oversimplification, and we'll get a little bit more deep into it, but it is a legitimate fear that I find rather fascinating, as in many ways, it kind of is a parallel to the overusage of the word Nazi, isn't it? Where the left pointed at anything and everybody and got Nazi, Nazi, Nazi. And that, well, in the end, only really helped the Nazis, because now the word that was used as a cudgel with which to beat them has lost all meaning. And this isn't even a recent occurrence. I believe it was George Orwell back in the 80s who said that the word Nazi has lost all of its actual meaning. And the closest synonym that can be discovered now in the English language is simply bully. That was 40 years ago. It's only, if anything, gotten worse since then. But without further ado, let's get on with the I Am the Reaction content now, part 2, the revengeing, I suppose. As I am still, technically, theoretically, on my little Christmas break, and Merry Christmas, by the way, and very soon Happy New Year's, but I wanted to get to this whilst the iron was still, if not hot, then at the very least lukewarm.
This cannot be real. Netflix cannot stop Netflixing. You want to know what I think is the funniest thing about this topic?
Gentlemen?
The funniest thing about this is the fact that this is apparently real, but people are so fatigued from forced DEI that they view an actual historical depiction of something that happened during, I think, World War II as being fake.
Yes, World War II, correct. But, okay, this is the first interesting point here, right? Yeah, we have actually done that. We have arrived at a point where we see a movie about black women sorting mail in World War II and go, this is not real. You're making this shit up, aren't you? Because, by the gods, it does sound made up, and the story itself largely is, insofar as the actual movie. I did a review of this movie, the 6888, I believe, and it focuses in on the completely wrong thing. It is near purely a victimization story, where we are introduced to a group of characters and expected to feel for them, in a sense, more akin with 2024 racial politics than the 1940s. It is not really a historical story about the genuine and real achievements of the 6888. It is instead an attempt to bring, well, modern-day race politics into the conversation. They invent anti-black characters solely just to victimize the black women, which is, again, it undermines the entire point. That's why I brought up the idea of calling Nazis Nazis having lost all meaning. When you make up characters just to victimize the characters that you yourself create here, which are at best loosely based on historical characters, you don't elevate those characters up. You don't bring them to the fore and make people go, oh wow, these people had it really hard, I feel bad for them. Instead, you make them look at them and go, why did you just make up, like, 2 or 3 white dudes to victimize these black people? Couldn't you find some actual racism in the 1940s? If you couldn't find some genuine examples of racial discrimination in the 1940s, why on God's good earth should I believe anything you say about race relations today? And that is the biggest problem of the 6888, that it is a modern politics movie far more so than it is a historical movie. And again, there was every opportunity to actually make it a historical movie by investigating how the 6888 actually solved the countless logistical issues inherent within moving enormous quantities of mail during a war. But let's go on.
My wife and I have been talking about the problems we are having with the mail.
That was the completely invented character, by the way. Let's see. Where was it? That guy there, that general, was invented solely to victimize the black ladies of the 6888.
Been talking about the problems we are having with the mail.
This cannot be real.
Oh, we're doing triple layer react content today. We're not just watching the video, we are reacting to Asmongold reacting to a critical drinker video, I think. Oh boy, we're in deep today.
The Postal Battalion?
It's not real. Nobody would make a show about this.
Ah, and there's the thing too. That is probably the biggest moment of disbelief. Like, no, there is no way anybody would make a piece of entertainment about delivering the mail. Not during the Second World War. Like, there's got to be better stories to tell, right? Well, yes, but none including the correct racial ideology to be relevant today. Or at the very least, very, very few.
This is our mission! And we will not fail!
Oh my god.
The
it is
6888.
Oh my God!
Allow me to pose you a question, dear viewer. When you think of the heroes of the Second World War, what do you imagine in your mind? Could it be the first wave of British and American soldiers who went ashore?
And Canadians, to be fair.
I know what people on Twitter would say if you say, imagine the heroes of World War II. I know what they would say.
I shall not cast any aspersions.
I got a good feeling about what they might say.
That's a good long pause there, to be fair.
Into a storm of fire and metal on the beaches of Normandy? Maybe the Soviet conscripts, starving and badly equipped, who charged...
Fun fact, the Soviet conscripts were actually not that badly equipped. In fact, if anything, they were over-equipped. The problem was, where exactly do you think they stored the majority of that equipment? Bearing in mind that the Soviet Union's idea of a war plan against Germany was them invading Germany, not the other way around. And so the Soviets themselves were shocked at how quickly Germany defeated France. Stalin had largely expected Germany to wear itself down against France for 2 or 3, 4 years and then just stab them in the back, essentially. And so the majority of the Soviet equipment was in Poland and on the border. Yeah, that didn't work out so well in hindsight, but yeah, no, initially they were very well equipped until most of their weapons fell into the hands of the Germans, of course. Oh well.
to almost certain death across the frozen, blasted hellscape of Stalingrad.
Oh.
Perhaps the Marines slogging through the steaming jungles and islands of the Pacific against a fanatically determined enemy.
Oh, God. What we really do need is an exploration of the Japanese psyche during World War II. How in essence, feudal societies, they'd only been industrialized for like less than 100 years at that point, I think, could be thrown into a modern conflict, an industrial conflict, barely prepared for it at all, and how they then dealt, well, with prisoners, etc., and how they dealt with the idea of surrender in and of itself. Spoiler alert, not well, neither one. And particularly when you also then reflect this compared to their actions during the First World War, not the First World War, well, yeah, no, the First World War as well, but the Russo-Japanese War in particular, where the Russians could not praise the Japanese enough for their incredibly humane and honorable treatment of POWs, which is quite a contrast to the Second World War POWs treatment.
Well, if your answer fell into any of those categories, then clearly...
Joseph Stalin. 2. Nice big tank.
You've got to do better, Senator. You've got to step up.
Because as everyone knows, the truly heroic battle of the
That's
Second
right,
World
Baldy.
War was sorting a backlog of undelivered mail.
Like I said, it sounds particularly retarded when you say it out loud.
I can't, man. Like, what are we even doing here? That right there is the subject of Netflix's compelling new show, The 6888, based on the real-life exploits... Wait, is exploits really the word I'm looking for here?
Uh-oh.
The real-life administrative task that was carried out by the American 6,888th Central Postal Directory Battalion during World War II.
So it's real.
And no, I'm not making this up.
Yeah.
And I know this...
you know, to be fair, it was a remarkable achievement. Now, as I pointed out in the review video as well, the American postal system of Second World War and how it moved mail to the front line was actually extraordinarily good in comparison to pretty much every other nation's postal system. So, I mean, they already achieved remarkable things, but during, you know, Normandy, Operation D-Day, and so all of that, it got a little bit difficult when you had to ship mail from, you know, one continent to the other continent, to an island, and then from that island to the actual main continent and so on, whilst also bearing in mind that you needed to move, you know, oil, ammunition, spare clothes, tanks, spare parts, equipment, food, the other 5 billion things an army requires to function. It was a major concern, not to mention also the complications happen with backlogged mail that couldn't be delivered, because, well, you're trying to find soldiers constantly on the move. It's not like these guys had a post box address. The Ardennes Forests, slot plot 325, no. They had to actually get in contact with the divisions and then figure out which person in the division would actually be receiving the mail. And on many occasions, the people would be, named the same thing or similar things. It was actually rather complicated. Again, if you were honest about it, you could make a genuine movie about the difficulties that face the 688s. If you were honest about it, that is.
Totally isn't how unit designations work, but I really love the idea that there's almost 7,000 postal battalions in the US Army. We don't...
No, that isn't how that works. Never mind, I'm not gonna get into that.
Don't get much fighting done in this year.
7,000 postal battalions? And how much we spend on this shit every year?
To be fair, a battalion is not that massive of an organizational unit either.
Damn, do they have email? I guess they didn't have email back then.
Army, but goddamn, our letters arrive on time every time.
They didn't have cell phones.
The gist of the show, and I'm gonna do my best to
They did have radios, so close, but
make this sound as dramatic as possible here, is that by 1944 there was a massive backlog of mail to and from the hundreds of thousands of men.
By 44 more or less, but even earlier potentially, depending upon how you mean by massive backlog, but
Fighting on the front lines in Europe.
Obviously,
naturally,
yeah.
this was bad for morale because soldiers like to get news from their families back home, so the army assigned the 688 Battalion to tackle the problem.
Yeah.
And they did, by working quickly and efficiently to sort and deliver letters.
Good for them.
I mean, that's it really.
Really?
So why exactly were Netflix keen to make a multi-million-dollar TV show about it?
now there is, of course, the question, which we have already largely answered, but I'm thinking we're probably going to get to it.
You mean the White Women's Army Corps?
Precisely. God, I'm going to get dinged even for that tiny little cut of in-movie audio, I swear to God.
Or is there another?
Well, I think you know why. Isn't it funny when studios are fully aware that their output's grown so ridiculous that it's literally become a meme, and instead of course correcting to prove their detractors wrong, they just say, fuck it.
This is the problem.
What is the movie? Denzel Washington. I believe a number of other, insanely famous, very prolific black actors in the same general type of topic. Which one was it? Glory? Was it Glory?
Oh, Glory. Oh, Glory was God, I love Glory. Glory is a great movie, and it has nothing to do with 688. Nothing whatsoever. Now, you want to find a way to properly, glorify black contributions to American war history. Glory is the way. Does it take ample liberties with the source material? Oh boy, does it. But it is glorification, not vilification. That is the vital difference between Glory and 688. See, 688 exists not to elevate the achievements of the 688. It is to look at today's society and go, oh, you racist scum, you. But as Glory does the exact opposite. It is there to glorify rather than criticize and downtread. It makes you care for these characters, and therefore the sympathy for what they had to go through comes naturally. It's weird, but if you actually like a character, you are more likely to give a shit about their inconveniences and the unjust treatment that they receive than if a bunch of black women are yelling at you about how they need to do better than white soldiers. Ah, Glorious, a good movie.
Yes. Yep, Morgan Freeman. Yeah.
And such a star-studded cast too. Holy shit. Morgan Freeman, Denzel Washington. Good movie.
See, we already had one of these that came out, and people loved this fucking movie. People thought this movie was great. 7.5, a 95, a 78.
When did it come out? 1989. 1989. I think I even brought up Glory as an example, not on the 688, but another one, to show like when these people are like, oh, America was so racist back in the day. 1989, we made a movie that unabashedly glorifies the contribution of black Americans to the war effort, and everybody loved it. What has changed?
Going all in, boys. Like,
Yeah.
I can totally get behind the idea of telling lesser-known stories or promoting the unsung heroes of World War
Sure.
II, especially ones from more diverse backgrounds that you don't tend to hear much.
You're right, but it's not women. That's a fact.
Well, listen, if you want to tell a story about women, Russian snipers. Holy shit, how many times have I brought up this example? Russian snipers. They are an unsung hero, but, you know, they're Russian, and the Russians are kind of out of vogue these days. But for Western heroes that are women, the WAAC is probably your best bet. Focusing in, I mentioned this in the review as well, focusing in on the smear campaign against the WAAS, focusing in on why they were so unwelcome and so incredibly unpopular. Maybe the, what was the equivalent in Britain? I know this, but it's escaped my mind. I know this. They had like a special name for themselves. But Britain had its own women's army movement, or well, to replace men in the rear world lines, and America basically copied Britain. So there are stories to be told, but the thing is, they're rarely going to be all that action-oriented because the Western powers did not put women in a fighting role.
About, and there's a plethora of stuff
Yeah.
to choose from if you care to look for it. Like Virginia Hall, a distinguished OSS field agent who worked in occupied Europe, created an entire spy network by herself, helped to arm French commandos, and was the only female civilian to receive the Distinguished Service Cross.
That is true, although I hasten to add, the French resistance did diddly dick nothing.
Or the Tuskegee Airmen,
Yeah.
an all-black fighter unit who flew bomber escort missions over Europe and were credited with destroying or damaging over 400 enemy aircraft.
Including an ME-262, by the way. And yeah, no, we even had a movie, Red Tails, recently, I think, and they were also mentioned in the Band of Brothers style bomber show that aired a little while ago. What was the name of that? I've forgotten already.
Or Ludmila Pavlichenko, a
There you go, our Soviet snipers.
Russian sniper known as Lady Death by her enemies, who was the most successful female sniper of the war with over 300 confirmed kills.
Why, I thought that was on 4chan.
Or Vernon Baker, an African-American soldier who personally took out 3 German machine gun nests, a command post, and a dugout after his platoon was pinned down by superior German forces.
Damn.
And was eventually awarded the Medal of Honor.
Wow.
Or the Night Witches, an all-female...
The Night Witches. Now, this one I do slightly disagree with. Although, you know what you could do with the Night Witches? I believe their second in command was actually convicted by the NKVD after the end of the war for crimes against the nation, and were not only grounded, but like sent off to exile, basically, I think, as well. But the Night Witches too are an interesting one, although they again didn't really achieve all that much.
Female bomber regiment who took to the air in rickety old biplanes that were so overloaded the pilots couldn't even carry parachutes, who flew in pitch darkness and attacked German positions all along the Eastern Front.
All along is a bit of an extent. Never mind, I shan't critique too much.
Could go on and on for hours listing people and groups who fought and often died for their countries in World War II and deserve a lot more recognition.
Man, I bet this would have sucked. Man, can you imagine that? That would suck so much dick. Oh my god. You think? Yeah, I do. This has been the worst fucking day of my life. It's a bad day, yeah.
They got, whose stories would lend themselves
because like,
pretty
you
easily.
think about like after you get done killing them all, you're still wet.
And it's only gonna get worse from there.
And you're gonna go to bed that night.
Bed? You mean a bedroll in a ditch somewhere, probably under artillery fire.
You're still wet, like, and there's sand everywhere. Oh my god.
This is the worst thing.
To a movie or TV show.
And yeah,
and
that's if
telling
you're
me
not
that
dead.
This is the best you could come
I
up
wouldn't.
with? Fucking postal workers? I mean, no disrespect.
And again, the reason why this was the best they could come up with is because these are black female postal workers. This is the apex of the progressive pyramid without including, well, disability and they themhood, basically. That's why they went for this. This is of greater value to the progressive on their moral stack than any number of male black war heroes or white women. It's like in the previous clip, like, you mean the white women's army corps. That's the reason why. Because this is a movie about modern day race politics, not about 1944 and 5 really is when they were actually deployed, I believe.
Respect whatsoever to the real life women who actually did this work. I'm sure it was long and tedious and demanding by today's standards, but describing their story as heroic is a bit of a stretch, don't you think? It's not like they were fighting on the front lines and risking life and limb to deliver vital communications that would turn the tide of battle or anything.
Nope.
They were sorting mail in an admin building in England, and they didn't even get there until February 1945 when the war was practically over. Sorry, lady. But paper cuts and cold coffee isn't quite the same level of danger as storming an enemy bunker
or even worse, being in the Ardennes forest, as that was around about the same time that the Germans threw their last reserves against the Americans and very nearly managed to inconvenience the US war machine greatly. As if they had simply had more fuel, and of course they didn't, there is every possibility that the Battle of the Bulge and the Ardennes offensive could have probably not driven the Allies off the continent, but it could have dealt them a serious blow that actually would have ended up working out a lot worse for the Germans, because it would have seen pretty much the entirety of the Germany occupied by the Soviets. Yeah, the Germans can be very, very happy that the Ardennes offensive did not succeed a second time around.
Facing down a German Tiger tank.
That's true.
Tell me, what else have you got in store for us, Netflix? The inspirational story of Bob from accounts and his attempts to file his backlog of TPS reports before the end of the tax year? Brenda's heroic last-minute push to have that PowerPoint presentation ready in time for the big corporate seminar?
Oh, jeez.
Larry refusing to let a shortage of printer ink stop him from displaying warnings about leaving unwashed dishes in the break room? Fuck you, Larry, I do what I want. Like I said, I'm all for recognizing the lesser-known contributions made during the war, but I don't think this is the way to go about it. Trying to frame every single person who performed even the most basic admin tasks in the safest environment possible as a hero isn't just a disingenuous attempt to pretend that chosen demographic group number 2...
Damn, I saw everybody put their arm up like that. I said, wait a minute, what side are they on? I was confused for like half a second. I said, what the fuck?
Contributed just as much as everyone else, but it's pretty fucking disrespectful to the actual heroes who fought and died for their countries. Those two things are not the same, so stop trying to pretend that they are. And honestly, it's tough to think of a better example of modern Hollywood entitlement and hubris, not to mention the complete lack of hardship and adversity faced by writers today, that this is what they consider a heroic and inspirational story. And as tempted as I am to watch it just for the unintentional lols, I think I'm gonna have to give the 6888 a dishonorable discharge. At ease, soldiers, because that's all I've got for today.
And there's the thing too. it is all well and good to simply just dismiss this movie based entirely on its premises, because its premises is really goddamn bad. It's sorting mail during World War II. It's bad. It's really bad. You'd actually struggle to find something worse. Genuinely so. But it is more important to realize the actual reason why this has happened instead. It's not merely that this is a bad premises, it is that this is a disingenuous one, that it is a race grifting one. That's the problem here, that somebody is taking advantage of the genuine achievements of this group of women to push a racial propaganda narrative in 2024. That is the purpose of this movie. That is the point of it. That is the intent, and that is what it succeeds in doing as well, to racialize an issue that, if anything, should be de-racialized instead. It's not to bring up the unsung heroes, because again, if you were to do that, you would do it in the manner of glory, not inventing made-up villains merely to victimize yourself. And the fact that we are missing that element of this conversation, I think, is rather detrimental to understanding just how bad the 6888 is. It isn't merely a bad movie with a poor premise, it is active race propaganda being produced with Netflix brand boldly displayed in the top right corner.
Go away now.
I feel like this one's not so bad. I feel like really it's I don't really even think this is this big of a deal. I think that this is actually not a big thing. It's not really a bad thing. I think the problem is that it exists inside of a culture that is now so on edge and on guard for stuff like this that even an authentic recreation of something that actually happened is seen as inauthentic. And I think this is really kind of I'll link y'all the video here. I think this is really a great example of what I was talking about and what I've been talking about for a long time, about how when you start trying to put forward a narrative and shit for so long, people start seeing it when it's not even really there. Because I saw people discourse about this, and half the people that were talking about it thought it was fake.
And see, that is kind of the point I was going to bring up here as well, because if this was indeed an honest attempt to bring forth a lesser known story of people who happen to be diverse, I would agree. Absolutely. It would not be a big problem. The existence of the story in and of itself is not an issue. It is the usage of the story as a weapon of current year politics that is the problem. Because whilst this is not a forced DEI story, of course, they were all black women, it is, however, a story that exists in the woke paradigm that we see now, and to push it yet further, it is to advantage that political position at the expense of others, at the expense of the people that it is supposed to be putting forth and glorifying.
And I feel like, you know, what are we really doing here? What are we accomplishing here? That's the way I see it, right? It's a side story no one's thought about. That's kind of cool. I don't think there's anything wrong with the movie, right? I don't. Like, and
now that makes me wonder if he's actually watched the movie, though, because I did. And yes, there is a lot wrong with the movie because, again, first and foremost, it is not actually an authentic representation of events.
And that's what I was saying, like with Glory, right, or any of these other movies, like the whole idea of like a minority regiment inside of a war. This is not the first time it's come out. And I feel like, again, it's cultural fatigue. Because I think that if this movie had come out in the year 1996, I feel like we probably all would have watched it as kids.
Possibly, but again, the difference is Glory glorifies. 6888 denigrates.
That's the reality. Probably all would have watched it, would have been fine. But I think that there's a degree of just fatigue that's happened, and I think that this movie is an unfortunate receptor. And in school, yeah, we probably would have watched it. No, think about it, right?
In school, yes, as that is one of the primary sources of, well, to be entirely honest, propaganda. Some of it's good. American History X, amazing. Some of it, less so.
We probably would have had to watch a movie like this if this had come out.
Had to. Now, there's a key term.
In, like, let's say 1998. And, you know, or whenever you were in elementary school or middle school, you probably would have had to, it would have been the day that you'd watch this movie. For sure. Abso-fucking-lutely. And people would have been like, all right, that's not so bad. Most likely, right? Directly to VHS release, yeah. And so, I think that, again, this is really the best indicator. And like, this is, I love this video because this is what I've been trying to say. I've been trying to say that we're coming close to this. I've been trying to say, guys, this is gonna happen. And people didn't want to listen, and now we have real stories that people think are fake because of the fatigue. That's it. You called it for a while ago, people become less tolerant. I know. Yeah, that's it. Comparing it to an actual war movie is a joke. I don't really think that's that big of a deal. Like, I mean, it's just about it's just marketing, right? I mean, that's it. I'd have to see the movie for myself. Somebody heard.
There you go. Because there is the real gist. I agree that this is a danger, that you can have people simply out of hand reject something like this. Absolutely, no doubt about it, and that is currently happening. But this is a very poor hill to stake your flag on, because the 6888, again, is simply not an authentic telling of the story in question.
Okay, from my folks out there decide to do Post-Workers movie, I honestly, I don't think that's a problem. I really don't. Like, I just don't. Like, I mean, I don't. Like, sorry. I'm not really there. I'm not there for it. Yeah. So that if it's a problem, you want to make money. Yeah, maybe people might not. The marketing for it is weird though. Yeah, no doubt, right? I could easily see that. But anyway, I just want to say, like, this is the result. It's like you try to create narratives and do shit like this, and then eventually you have people calling history fake. That's it, and it's really sad to see it happen, man. It really is.
And again, that's the interesting part about this that I wanted to like bring up here. It is absolutely true. That is a legitimate point, that history can be seen as fake because we have been overloaded with the narrative to the point that we see something that seems to be the narrative and we reject it out of hand. Absolutely, that is a danger. There is a danger of woke becoming simply just the new Nazi, a term deprived of definition, something we use simply just to mean bad person. But 6888 is not it. We are not quite there yet in some ways, as the 6888 is absolutely a legitimate recipient of the critique that this is not a good or honest representation of World War II, that is instead made to push a political narrative not related to 1940s, but to 2024 instead. That is the issue here. And I do hope that Asmongold actually does go and watch this movie, because then he'll probably see the, again, purely invented antagonistic characters and begin to wonder, does this really send an honest message? Or does it send a dishonest, manipulative one? Anyways, that is my brief interruption of my Christmas holiday to talk about this, which is a rather interesting topic, I do believe. And I will see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.